Hi, welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. I'm Dianne, your lactation consultant.
And I'm Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder. And today's episode is brought to you by Fairhaven Health. The Milky's No Break, No Leak breast milk storage bags have reinforced sides and a double zipper because we all cry over spilled breast milk. These bags will not leak milk and won't crack in the freezer. The bags also have milk storage guidelines printed on every bag. Head to fairhavenhealth.com and use promo code BADASS for 10% off your purchase.
And I have the review of the week.
Cool.
So this one is an older one. It was from before we were even doing review of the week. But I was kind of looking through a whole bunch of them, and I love the name of it. It's from Booby Newbie. I am a new first-time mom, and I'm breastfeeding. I don't have a lot of support except for my husband, so this podcast really helps me stay strong. Thanks so much for the help and encouragement. And I think that's just so telling for a lot of the stuff we see because support is so lacking out there. So it's amazing that people can listen to a podcast and get so much support. I mean, I just think this is such an awesome medium for giving this information because social media is great and all this, but you could never make a post on Facebook that could have all 30 minutes of information from a lactation consultant and an advocate in it, Right. And you don't know how they're saying things, you can't tell the tone of the post and it's so much. I don't know. I'm so grateful that people tune in and that's what they feel from this.
Yeah.
It's so fantastic. So. And what are we going to talk about today?
Well, today we're going to talk about your period and fertility. Ugh. Because I've been getting a lot of emails about this, a lot of messages, and I feel like people always are always just wondering about this. And I posted on Facebook today on my Facebook page. I was like, "We're going to be recording this episode, and what questions do you have?" And a lot of people had questions, and it was all the typical questions that I hear. And so I think that'll be, we could really, really get into the detail of like your period, postpartum, when's it coming back, what's normal, which is a really funny question when it comes to your period, and then fertility and what's the deal with fertility while you're breastfeeding.
Right. No, this is great. In fact, I was just talking about this the other day with a couple of friends of mine, one that has a 2-month-old and one that has an 8-month-old or a 9-month-old, 10-month-old, something like that. And, they were talking about like when they got their periods back with which child, and it was different for every baby that they had, so it was like, it's really cool to like listen to how different it is for everybody. And I hope that everybody kind of takes that away from this, that they know that it doesn't have to be like, oh, you get it back at this time, or it should happen at this point, or, it's so different for everyone.
It's so amazing because one of the questions that really stood out to me was, when can I expect my period to come back? And that's such a question that everybody has, except there's no answer.
No, there isn't.
There's no answer to it. But I got a message from somebody on Instagram a few days ago, and she was like well over 2 years of breastfeeding, and she didn't have a period. And she was like, is this normal? And I'm like, normal. Normal? I don't know. It's not normal. It's just, there's no way to tell. Some people go, it's just like when you stop breastfeeding, some people like 2 years later are like, I can still squeeze some milk out.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Yep. It's like, this stuff is like, it's all hormonal, and there's really no predicting it.
And when you think that it's, a lot of people say, well, if you're exclusively breastfeeding and, you're breastfeeding around the clock and you're not using pacifiers and you're not doing this and that, you're not giving bottles, then you'll go a longer span of time with no period. And I have seen that happen for sure. But I've also seen women that went back to work who are doing, half bottle feeding because they're going back to work. And yes, they're pumping, but it's still not, not quite the same stimulation.
Right.
And they don't get their period back for, several months. And then my friend, the one with the 10-month-old, she is like, I've been around her for the last 10 months and she's had this baby and it's her third, and she breastfeeds this kid like any peep that she makes. She goes on the boob. Like, that's just how they are. They're very much like, they're connected to each other. They co-sleep. She calls her like Velcro baby because she's like always there. She got her period back at like 6 months, you know, and she's one that I would guess would go like a year and a half, you know?
Yeah.
No, like it really is just so variable from everybody.
It really is. There's really, really no way to tell. And and this is why this is exactly how people end up pregnant.
Yes.
Thinking that they weren't ovulating because they weren't having a period. Except the thing is that you're going to ovulate before you see that period. Mm-hmm. So you're just, you know, walking along, having sex, humping your husband or whoever, you know, you're married to, or whoever your partner, you know, whoever. And, you know, it's like, whoops, I'm pregnant. How is this possible? I didn't have a period.
You ovulated.
You probably were going to have one, you know, next month or so, or, you know, whatever. But so, and that's, you know, I think there's just so much to say, but I think, you know, just now that it's in my head, I think that is, now I forgot what I was going to say. I've like this list in front of me of all these questions, and I'm like, oh my God, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that. Okay.
Now, whenever I talk to people about this, one of the things that I always think of, and this could be totally off the mark, but I'm just kind of like taking some of my own experience and just from working in the field for so long, I think women should look back to what the history of their period has been like too. You know, everything is very hormonal. And if you were somebody who was kind of irregular and like you went off birth control and it took you a long time to kind of get that back again, and like that is also telling on what it's going to be like when you get your period back with breastfeeding. You know, the hormones, maybe your body it takes it time to adjust to different hormonal changes.
Right. Yeah, there's no, and you know, you can put 5 women in a room and say, you know, okay, when did everybody's period come back? And you're going to get such drastically different answers. Mm-hmm. And Absolutely. Then another question that a couple of people had was, will it be terrible? You know, will it really hurt? Will it be strong? You know, kind of like, what's it going to be like when it does come back? And that's, you know, another thing that I think if you're going to ask this room full of people is you're going to get a different answer from every single one of them. Mm-hmm. And there is no rule. I mean, mine came back and I didn't find it terrible at all. But other people think it's very strong with very crampy, very heavy, very...
I think mine got worse as I got older. So, like, each child, each pregnancy, it got worse. Not like, you know, I think it got heavier, but maybe that was just, you know, change in the uterus or whatever. I don't know. But the other thing that I thought was kind of amazing was that I was so much more in tune with it. Like, I could feel myself ovulating.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas I couldn't do that before I had kids, you know? So it's like I was just so much more in tune with the hormones and so much more aware of what was going on in my body than I was when I was like 25, because then it's like whatever, you know. But I thought that was really just every year it got a little bit more intense for me.
Yeah. I know. I feel like when you have kids, just like go through the process of birth and breastfeeding and all of this, you get to know your body in a way that you just never knew. And that translates to it's so awesome. Yeah. And it translates to like all these other areas, like your period and ovulating, and be able to track that stuff, which comes to something we'll get to in a minute, which is family, you know, like birth control. And a lot of people who have had babies can rely on the natural family planning or the rhythm. What are they? You know,
they used to call it the rhythm method, right?
Yeah, they used to call it that. I think they call it something else now. Natural family planning. Mm-hmm. And a lot that works for a lot of people who've had kids because you really can learn about your body.
Yeah,
and know, and you know, then you don't have to do the whole, you know, the birth, you know, the pills or the whatever if you don't want to.
No, it's great. One of the other things that I hear quite a bit too is a woman will tell me she got her period back, but then didn't get it back the next month. But then that's got, you know, like very irregular at first.
Yes, that's what I was going to say before. Yes. When you get it, yes, thank God. So when you get it back, you know, people are like, oh my God, I got my period back. And then it doesn't come back next month. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? You know, is there something going on? Am I pregnant? I don't think I'm pregnant. You know, is there something wrong with me? Like, it's not, it's going to be probably it'll be a while before it makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it might not be the same time. I remember thinking that, like, okay, I always got mine, like, the last week of the month. But when I got my period back, it wasn't the last week of the month. Like, if things just changed.
Sure.
It just changed.
Yeah, and you might have been like every 28 days person before kids, and that might be completely different now, too.
Yep.
So, will it be terrible? We don't know. It could be, if it is, this is the other concern people had is if it's bad, if it hurts, if it's crampy, if it's very, PMS-y, if it's, you're kind of feeling emotionally, off, mm-hmm. Will it be like that forever? And no. Mm-mm. Things will even out.
I think people are just depressed that they get their period back.
I know.
Like, yeah. I think that's kind of like, society is like, oh yeah, you don't get your period when you breastfeed. Like, woohoo! It's like it's a guarantee, and it's really not. It's really not. It's kind of one of those things where some people do, some people don't.
Right.
But I don't think it's anything anybody should count on. If it's a nice little bonus, if it happens,
it is a bonus for as long. Yeah, right. There was one person who she had a funny comment in the thread. She was like, it's Heidi. She goes, I'm just going to sit here and be jealous. I nursed for 5 years and got my period every single month. Come to think of it, I found out I was 11 weeks pregnant with my twins because I went to the doctor after having my period for 11 straight weeks. I'll probably go through menopause and still get the damn thing. You hear these, you hear these stories of people they didn't know they were pregnant because they were continuing to get their period. Mm-hmm. And you're like, what? Oh, my God. That's not supposed to happen. Well, okay, tell nature that.
Right.
Just really weird things happen, and it doesn't mean that something's wrong.
Right. I mean, it's just,
and if you're concerned, obviously. Right. The world according to whatever. Yeah. That's the motto for your period and postpartum period.
Well, there is no rule. Like, there's no, this is going to happen.
There's not. No, and I think people are like, people want to know, and you can't. It's one of the things you can't know.
But how does this impact breastfeeding? Does this mean you have to stop? Do I stop breastfeeding? I've had other people. Now, does that mean I can't breastfeed anymore now that my period's back? I got my period back at 6 months. Does that mean I can't breastfeed anymore? No, not at all.
Yeah. No, please keep breastfeeding.
Yeah, of course you can. Of course you can. It doesn't make any difference. You can breastfeed. But there's a lot of, like, sometimes cultural things around it. Maybe that the milk doesn't, they think the milk doesn't taste right during that time. Or, like different cultural things that people say when you have your period that impacts breastfeeding. And that's not true. That's not the case.
Right.
Your baby will still breastfeed when you have your period.
Yeah. Yeah, there's you see that a lot with breastfeeding. There's a lot of like beliefs in various cultures about things surrounding birth, pregnancy, breastfeeding, things like that. So if you come from a culture where there are those beliefs, it could be that, there's not evidence for it and then it won't affect, your breastfeeding. Although, if people have different beliefs, then by all means, that's for you to decide.
Yeah.
So, and then here's the other thing that, as we transition into kind of fertility is people are like, oh, cool. I'm breastfeeding. We kind of touched on this. I'm breastfeeding. I'm not getting my period, so I can use this as birth control. And then,
not.
Oops.
Yeah. Oops. Overall, I think it was, I think different cultures did use it as a way to space their children, because for the most part, not everybody, but for the most part, I think there are a lot of women who will go several months without, getting a period, especially if you are exclusively breastfeeding and the hormones are different. But a lot of cultures, that's how they space their babies.
Yeah.
It
can be difficult to get, you should know it can be difficult to get pregnant while you're breastfeeding because of the hormones that breastfeeding involves. Yeah. But it's not a guarantee. You can't rely on it for birth control because it's not a guarantee. But then people will say, can I even get pregnant while I'm breastfeeding? Yeah, you can. And the longer it goes on, the more time that passes, the more likely that you will. Mm-hmm. Because you want to, generally you want to wait. You want to wait for your body to heal, first of all.
Yeah. I was just going to say that too. Like, yeah, because I have people that have said to me, well, I would like to get pregnant sooner rather than later. So I want to wean by 8 months or something like that. And it's like, but this is kind of nature's way of like, your body needs to heal. It needs to heal and recoup some of what it's lost during pregnancy the first time.
Yeah. And actually, if you're breastfeeding on demand, you're exclusively breastfeeding on demand, even when you start, introducing solids and things like that, and you just keep going, you'll get the signal from your body when it's ready. When your period comes back, starts to be a little more regular, that's kind of a sign from your body that, okay, we're starting to get things, back under wraps here. And that's different for everybody.
Yes. Absolutely.
But you do hear, this is the other thing that I hear a lot is, like you just said, I want to get pregnant. How can I get my 6-month-old to breastfeed less so that I can get my period back?
I don't even know how to answer that.
That's like, because you don't want to withhold breastfeeding from a small baby. Mm-hmm. Breastfeeding on demand is really important for your milk supply, for their growth and all of this. So, you want to be careful early on to not start withholding.
Right.
As they get older, if you listen to the podcast, I'm all about boundaries. And, as you're, as time goes on, your body, the baby will be nursing less just naturally, and your period will come back eventually. But if you're, 2 years out and you still haven't gotten a period, it might just be your body being like, all right, just give me a minute here.
Yeah.
I need to get this together.
But obviously you can breastfeed and get pregnant. Otherwise tandem nursing would not be a thing.
Exactly. It wouldn't exist.
Right.
Yeah.
So it just is a thing that, it'll happen for you. It might just not be in the time frame that you want it to be.
Yeah, I remember that. With my first, thinking like, okay, I'd really like to, I'd really like to start trying for another baby, and like I still don't have my period, and I thought about it a little bit, about manipulating things, and then I was like, nah. It'll happen when it happens. And I was just, I'd worked out, you work so hard to get breastfeeding to work,
Yep.
Just be a little bit patient. And I know it's really hard because these days, people are having kids older. I don't know, these days. Some people have kids a little older. And so it's like, okay, the biological clock is literally ticking.
Yeah.
But, just giving yourself a little bit of time. We're not talking about like 5 years or anything.
No, but it is healthier all the way around.
Yeah. One thing I don't want to go on without talking about milk supply, because that's a really big thing too. People are saying, what's going to happen to my milk supply?
Right. Maybe we should talk about that one after a word from our sponsor.
That would be a really good idea. And this is a word from our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Fairhaven Health. The Milky's Softies nursing pads have a 3-layer design that guards against leaks without adding bulk or puffiness to your bra. A plush natural fiber layer rests lightly against your skin and wicks moisture away. The nursing pads are machine washable too. Head to fairhavenhealth.com and use promo code BADASS for 10% off your purchase.
So supply is a big deal when this, because of hormones, right?
Yeah.
So
you could, a lot of people say they do see a dip in their supply when their period comes back.
You know what I have found, though? I found that people only notice that dip in supply if they're pumping. So if it's a mom that is just breastfeeding, I never hear that mom that's just breastfeeding say, I got my period back. I think my baby's still hungry. It's only because they're pumping and they're visualizing
and they can
less
see
milk.
it. Yeah, yes. The breastfeeder doesn't even notice.
Right, because the baby can always get what they need. They can get what they need. So especially at that stage of the game, they're a little bit older. Like they can, you just nurse them, whatever. But if you're pumping, your body, doesn't respond as well to that pump. So you're going to see less milk. So just because you're pumping less during that time does not mean your baby is not getting what they need. Right. And it's not the whole time you have your period either. It's usually like, ovulation time or something like that.
For like a day or so.
Yeah,
right?
It bounces back up.
It's not going to be your whole month. It's not going to be every single time forever.
No, it bounces back. But
yeah.
it's good to know that, because if you aren't prepared, then you go, oh my God, what happened? What happened to my supply? What's going on here? Is something wrong?
Well, exactly. Yeah. And people are like, oh my God, supply is like the number one worry of breastfeeders, right? And it's the number one top worry.
Yeah.
That, that we're not making enough milk, that the baby's not getting enough, and that our milk supply is drying up. But that's not happening.
No, it really is just a hormonal change, and everything bounces back. I did read once that you could take magnesium and calcium supplement. I don't know too much about it. Like during that time, I don't know too much about it. I don't know really anybody that's ever done it. So I don't know if it works, but if any, that might be something to look into if people are looking for a way to maybe kind of like make it an easier transition. But
yeah,
I really
that's the other thing is people want to know what they can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best thing to do, just the thing to focus on, is to continue breastfeeding.
Right. It's really, and I think just having the knowledge, when okay, this is normal, this happens, and it just, is a process, and it'll bounce back and it's fine. Like, then you won't panic if this is how it works. This is what's going to happen.
Right. I mean, that is, again, like that's just the whole idea of this podcast, right? I mean, like, just knowing things, knowing that what's happening is normal, knowing that it's a part of the process, knowing that it's going to pass, it makes those transitions, those days or whatever that you're going through, it just kind of go a little faster. Mm-hmm. And you don't panic. You're not like, oh God, I have to stop, or what am I going to do? Or, I mean, everyone's panicking about something at some point, but
I know. But yeah.
Yeah. So, I just want to mention that if anybody is having specific questions about breastfeeding while pregnant or tandem nursing, we have an episode on that early on, which we should redo.
We should, yeah.
But there is one up there, a good episode. It's up. It's way back. It's like way in the beginning, one of the first ones.
Yeah.
And if you have questions about those things, then go back and listen to that episode, because that is all about breastfeeding while pregnant and tandem nursing.
And, a lot of providers will still tell you can't breastfeed and be pregnant.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And
they'll literally tell you that it's not possible. And while you are literally breastfeeding a baby pregnant.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, no, it's not possible.
That is false.
Okay.
That is, again, tandem nursing wouldn't be a thing. That is absolutely false.
Right.
You can be pregnant and breastfeed. It is not hurting anything. It is not taking any nutrients away from the baby, the new baby. It is not, or the fetus. It's not hurting you. It's not going to put you into labor. There is no problem with it. In fact, some people have told me that they felt better breastfeeding while they were pregnant.
Yeah.
Like they felt less sick, less nauseous. They had less morning sickness. Again, because it levels out your hormones. Like this is all a very hormonal process. So a lot of times people will say that they felt better, that they didn't have an issue with it.
Yeah. I felt okay breastfeeding through pregnancy until the end when nursing aversion set in. And that was like not fun. And that lasted years as I tandem nursed. But anyway, we are digressing. That is in that other episode. Go listen to it.
Yeah, definitely.
People want to know, can they take birth control while breastfeeding?
Yeah, you can.
Now, is that going to affect milk supply?
Depends on what it is and how your body responds. And this is another one of those things where people say, oh, you can go on this birth control. It's fine. Nothing should happen to your milk supply. Okay. Because everybody's the same, right?
And it's hormones, so you can't control it.
Right. What I always tell people about birth control, if you can't use a condom because people don't want to, then, and I get it. You're married. Who wants to use a condom if you're married? Or you have, one partner. But I always tell mothers, there's so many options now for birth. There are so many options for birth control that if you were on something before you got pregnant and it worked for you and you knew what the side effects were, then I would just go back to that. And because what a lot of times what you'll hear is, say it's a woman that had an IUD and she gets pregnant, she has a baby, she goes to her doctor at, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And they say, oh, you're breastfeeding, so we're going to put you on the mini pill, which is a lower hormonal pill for breastfeeding mothers. That's birth control pill. This is a person that doesn't take pills, that doesn't remember when to take pills, that didn't have to take a birth control pill before, that doesn't know how she's going to react to this pill. Like, why are we going to have somebody change her whole pattern for something that is supposedly the thing that they should be taking because they're breastfeeding? Like, it doesn't matter. All of it's hormonal. All of it's going to impact you. The only way we're going to say, yes, this is totally safe for breastfeeding, it's going to have no impact on your milk supply, is if you take something that has 0 hormones in it, and that's the copper IUD, and people don't usually do that. But that's the only thing. Anything else, I would say, you know what? The only thing you can't reverse is the depot shot, because that is in your system for 3 months. You get that shot, it's in your system. If it screws up your milk supply or makes your hair fall out or makes you bleed for months, there's no turning it around because you can't get rid of it. Anything else, you can just say take it out or stop it or change it or whatever. So that's what I tell people to do. Like, if you had one that you liked and you know what the side effects are, you know how you react to it, then go back to that one. If we see that it's a problem, then we can just stop it and try something different or, whatever. Usually if you wait a couple of months, your milk supply is well established, breastfeeding's going well, that is your odds are better that it's not going to impact your supply like that. Like if your breastfeeding is well established. If you get it early on where your hormones are already all over the place, you might have more of a problem with it. And a lot of it does depend on how your body reacts to stuff. I'm really sensitive to birth control stuff. So it's, for me, I'm like, I wasn't good with it.
Yeah. So that's you're going to have to talk to your doctor or your midwife or whatever about what you were on before. What do you think is best? But it could affect your supply. And like Dianne was saying, you can go off of it if it's, if it's something you don't like.
And it'll bounce back. You turn it around.
Yeah, totally.
But if it's been a while since you've had a birth control, because for some people, maybe they've been trying for a while or whatever, like, I swear, I think new stuff comes out every year.
Yeah.
Or changes. Like, it used to be, oh, this one was good for 3 years. Now it's good for 5. Now it's good. Like, they're so different now. And there's so many options that, there might be something that might be a little bit easier for you.
Okay, what about ovulation test strips? Are those reliable when you're breastfeeding?
I wouldn't think so. But that's just my opinion. I mean, but that's kind of like, I kind of feel like I could say like it's kind of an educated opinion, because if you're breastfeeding and your period is not very regular anyway, or it's going to be impacted by hormones, then how is that going to be very accurate?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
there's a lot of things that are just not, that they just don't even recommend. You're doing like getting my cholesterol checked or something. They're like, you're breastfeeding. Don't bother. It's not going to, it's not going to be accurate. Like, it's a really special time where things are just chaos. What did you call it? The world of whatever?
The world of whatever goes. It is just, it kind of irritates me because people will put things out there to lure in unsuspecting women and prey on their want to have a baby. Like, it's kind of like with the breastfeeding things, oh, you want a milk supply? Here, eat these cookies. Oh, do you want this? You want a drink? Here, there's these alcohol test strips. Like, it is, none of this stuff matters. You want to get pregnant? Here, use these ovulation strips. Mm-hmm. It's just I feel like it's just a way that we've totally disconnected with our body.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we don't need any of that stuff.
No, and what I always tell people is they're like, I'm trying to get pregnant again. And I'm breastfeeding. My period's irregular. What can I do? And I'm like, have sex.
Yeah.
That's all you can do. That's all you can do is have sex and hope that you get lucky.
You know, or
because during this time, it is just, there's not a lot that you can predict.
Right.
What about fertility treatments? Somebody asked about that. Is that safe to go through while you're breastfeeding?
I think it depends on what the treatment is, because there's a lot of different ones. And I think it really depends on what it is. And I have looked up some of it for people in the past, certain medications and things. And it also would depend on how much you're breastfeeding. I mean, are you, breastfeeding still 5, 6, 7 times a day because it's a younger baby? Or is it a baby that's 2 years old and you're breastfeeding him once a day? That's going to make a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, if you have more questions, if we didn't answer your questions, please let us know, because we can, like, everybody's got a unique situation, but that's kind of the deal with this, is that everybody's got a different, unique situation that is really hard to predict.
Absolutely. And if it is a fertility treatment kind of thing, I would have a lactation consultant look up every single medication so that you could see like what exactly it is and whether or not it's compatible.
Yeah, and make sure you're talking with the doctor that you're working with has some sort of breastfeeding knowledge, because it's real annoying when they don't. Because it's just like they're just saying all kinds of things and they don't know. And so, try to find somebody who at least knows a little bit about breastfeeding and lactation and the effects of that on the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and thanks for listening, everybody. And we hope that you will share your experience with us in the iTunes review section. And maybe Dianne will read your review for one of our reviews of the week.
Yeah.
And you can head to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com, and you can find our sponsor links there and all of our promo codes and an awesome list of resources of everything that we talk about and all of our other episodes, which you need to listen to because there's like over 80 now.
Almost 90. Like
90.
Like 90.
Yeah. And you can also find information about how to schedule your online consultation with Dianne.
All right.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.